I always thought I was my father's world. He raised me on his own after Mom passed when I was 6. It was just the two of us for years, me and Dad, building memories out of leftover pizza nights, toolboxes in the garage, and Sunday drives with no destination. He called me his lucky charm. And for a while I believed I'd never have to fight for a place in his heart. Until she came along. Her name was Clarissa. She worked in real estate, wore expensive perfume, and called me sweetheart like it was an obligation. Dad met her when I was in high school. By the time I left for college, they were married. And with her came Bryce, her son from a previous marriage. He was 1 year older than me, all charm and designer shoes, calling Dad sir in public and old man in private. At first, I didn't worry. Dad and I still had our traditions. He still called, still sent care packages to my dorm, still signed his cards, "Love you more than pizza and football." But something shifted during junior year. He missed my birthday call. Then Thanksgiving dinner was just too busy this year. By the time I came home for winter break, my room had been remodeled into Clarissa's reading lounge. I tried to tell myself I was overreacting, that he was just distracted, busy, trying to blend families. But the more I visited, the more I felt like a guest, a tolerated one. One day I walked in on Bryce sitting in Dad's office, at his desk, going through files. I asked what he was doing. He just smirked. "Relax." He said I could look at the estate plans. I blinked. "Estate plans?" He grinned like he'd just won something. "You know, the will. In case anything happens. He wants everything to stay in the family." I laughed nervously. "Well, that's good, I guess." But something in my stomach twisted, and Bryce, he leaned in just a little and said, "Funny thing about family, huh?" I didn't say anything to Dad, not right away. I told myself I was imagining things, that Dad wouldn't cut me out. But that doubt, it didn't go away, especially when Clarissa started making comments. Subtle ones. Like when I offered to help fix a leak in the garage sink. Something I'd done with Dad since I was 12. And she chirped, "Oh, honey, Bryce already handled it. He's really stepping up lately, isn't he?" Or when I brought over photos of Mom for a memory album and she frowned and said, "Maybe it's time to leave the past in the past, don't you think?" It wasn't long before Dad stopped calling me his lucky charm. Now I was kiddo, then just Rachel. Still, I held out hope. When I graduated college, I invited him to the ceremony. He didn't come. Clarissa sent a bottle of wine with a card that said, "Congrats, kiddo." Not even signed with his name. 2 years passed. I built a life. A small apartment, a steady job, a dog named Moose who never made me feel like a visitor. But something kept pulling me back to that house, the one I grew up in, the one that no longer had my photos on the walls. One day I decided to visit unannounced. I knocked on the front door. Clarissa opened it with a tight smile. "Rachel, what a surprise." Dad came out behind her, slow, thinner than I remembered. I hugged him. He didn't hug back, just said, "You should have called first." We sat in the kitchen, the same one where he used to pour us cereal at midnight just for fun. Now it was sleek, modern, soulless. I tried to make conversation, told him about my job, my apartment, Moose. He nodded politely. Like I was a stranger he had to be nice to. And then, just as I was about to leave, I asked the question, "Dad, I need to know. Is something wrong? Did I do something?" He blinked at me, then said the words that cracked me wide open. "It's not about doing anything wrong, it's just... things change. Bryce has been here. He helps. He fits." I whispered, "He's not your son." He looked me dead in the eye and said, "Neither are you, really. Not anymore." I left in a haze, drove home shaking. I told myself I was done, that I didn't need their approval, that I didn't care what happened with the estate or the house or any of it. Until the letter came, 3 months later, a formal envelope from a law office. Inside, the finalized copy of Dad's will, and on page 1 in black and white, "I, William Thomas Bennett, leave my estate, including the family home, financial assets, and business holdings, to my stepson, Bryce Edward Hale. My biological daughter, Rachel Lynn Bennett, is welcome to visit on holidays at the discretion of the estate holder." At the discretion of Bryce, my childhood home, my father's legacy, erased. I stared at that paper for a long time. Then I folded it, put it in a drawer, and made a new plan, because they thought I'd disappear quietly. But they forgot the one thing that makes me dangerous. I remember everything. Every secret, every story, every document. The day I received my father's will, something inside me split clean in two. One part of me mourned the man who used to make me pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. The other part, she was ready for war. I wasn't after money or property, I was after truth. Because nothing about this felt clean. Not the language, not the timing, not the man my father had become under Clarissa's watchful eye. And I knew deep down, this wasn't just emotional betrayal. This was deliberate erasure. I started with public records. Dad's business had once been modest, a repair shop he inherited from his father. But in the last decade after marrying Clarissa, it grew rapidly, almost too rapidly. I searched for documentation on ownership changes, and there it was, hidden deep in the county filings. Transfer of ownership, Bennett Family Auto Holdings LLC, sole beneficiary, Bryce Edward Hale. Signed by my father. 2 months before I graduated college. I went colder than ice. He'd already handed over the business years before I even knew. And then I noticed something strange. A footnote attached to the deed. Signed under advisement of estate planner C. Hale. Clarissa, she wasn't just influencing my father. She was designing his every move. I needed help. So I reached out to the only person who still kept ties to my dad's old world, Aunt Jean, my mom's sister. She hadn't been close to us since Clarissa came along. But when I called and said, "It's about Dad's will," she said, "Come over." Now. She made us tea, sat me down, and said something that made my heart stop. "Did you ever see your mother's will?" I shook my head. Dad always said everything was joint, that he took care of it. Jean frowned. "She left something for you." "I know because I witnessed it. She made sure the house would be yours someday. Not just because she loved you, but because she knew your father wouldn't always do the right thing." My throat went dry. "Are you saying he ignored her will?" Jean opened a small metal box and handed me a yellow document. There it was, signed, dated, notarized, my mother's last wishes. "In the event of my passing, I leave my half of our home to my daughter, Rachel Lynn Bennett, to be held in trust until her 25th birthday." I was 27. I should have owned half that house 2 years ago, but Dad had never mentioned it. And now, it was all in Bryce's name. I felt fury rising, but beneath it something deeper. A sense of violation. This wasn't just manipulation, this was theft. of a daughter's inheritance, of a mother's legacy, of every moment I thought my family stood for something real. Aunt Jean squeezed my hand. "You can fight this, Rachel. Your mom wanted you to. She made sure you had rights. That house, it's not all his to give." I spent the next week gathering documents, birth certificates, property records, emails, photos, even old texts from Dad that referred to your house one day when talking about the garage or the front porch. I didn't confront him, not yet, because I had a plan now, and I needed more. So I went to visit an old friend, Nolan, my childhood neighbor and now a paralegal. He agreed to take a look at everything. After reading through the files, he looked up and said, "Rachel, this isn't just a mistake. This looks like coercion, fraud even. Especially if he never disclosed your mother's will to the estate attorney. If you go to court with this, you might not just get back your share, you might trigger a full investigation." I breathed in slowly. That was it. That was my way back in. But I didn't want just a court battle. I wanted to hit them where it hurt most, publicly. The opportunity came 2 weeks later. Clarissa and Bryce were hosting a family legacy gala at the Old Country Club. A press release went out with Dad's name on it. They were accepting a community award for generational business excellence. I RSP'd as myself. No fake name, no disguise, just Rachel Bennett, the woman they buried behind legal ink. I walked in that night wearing the same necklace Mom gave me when I was 13. The pendant Dad once kissed and called your good luck charm. The room was all marble floors and forced smiles. Clarissa froze when she saw me. Bryce raised an eyebrow. And Dad, well, Dad looked older, grayer, worn, but still silent. I didn't cause a scene, not yet. I waited until the award presentation. They flashed photos of the Bennett family legacy on a screen. Every shot was of Bryce, Clarissa, and Dad. Not one of me, not one of Mom. When the applause began, I stood up quietly, walked to the edge of the stage, and said, calm, clear, and in front of everyone, "I think there's a mistake. You left out the original Bennett who helped build that business. My mother, and the one who was written out of it, me." The room went dead silent, then whispers, then gasps. Clarissa tried to pull me aside. By the time the article hit the local papers, it was too late for Clarissa to bury the story. The headline wasn't just a scandal, it was a spotlight. Daughter erased. Estate dispute exposes secret will, hidden inheritance. And suddenly, I wasn't invisible anymore. Phone calls flooded in. Former business partners of my dad, old neighbors, even a local reporter who had grown up 2 streets away from me. People remembered who I was now. They remembered my mother, her kindness, how she helped my dad open that garage in the first place, how she was the soul of that house before Clarissa ever stepped inside. And now, the world was listening to my side, but not everyone was thrilled. Clarissa released a statement through her lawyer claiming that I was unstable, estranged, and motivated by money. She said my mother's will was outdated and invalid, but what she didn't know was that my legal team had already verified it. The trust was never dissolved. It had simply been ignored, illegally, and we were taking it to court. The first hearing was a blur of lawyers, documents, and tension so thick I could barely breathe. Dad didn't look at me. He sat next to Clarissa and Bryce like he didn't even recognize me. But I could tell a mole behind his hollow stare. He knew what he had done. He just didn't have the courage to face it. The judge was stern, fair, and alarmed by what she read. My mother's will wasn't just valid. It had legal supremacy over anything that followed. Because Dad had never formally contested or revoked it, he had simply acted like it didn't exist. Clarissa's lawyer argued that the family home and business had always been intended for Bryce. But I had something stronger than intent. I had paper, dates, witnesses, and a mountain of circumstantial evidence proving Clarissa manipulated the estate from the moment she married in. Then came the twist I didn't see coming, a betrayal I never expected, from someone on my side, Nolan, my childhood neighbor, the paralegal who had helped me organize everything. He took the stand for the defense, claimed he never saw proof of coercion, that he'd warned Rachel her evidence might not hold, and that I was fixated on revenge, not justice. I sat frozen. I trusted him. I told him everything. And now he was lying, under oath. After court recessed, I found him in the hallway. "Why?" I whispered. He looked down, then muttered, "Bryce offered me a job, more money than I've ever made." I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just stared. Because betrayal by now was a language I understood fluently. And he had just confirmed what I already knew. They were scared. Scared enough to lie, to bribe, to drag me through the mud just to keep their stolen empire intact. But here's the thing about empires built on lies. They crumble fast when the truth is loud enough. The next day, we brought out the big guns. A financial forensic specialist I'd hired traced irregular payments from my dad's account. Thousands of dollars regularly withdrawn in the months after Clarissa moved in. The money was funneled into a private account in Bryce's name. Even worse, one of the payments had a memo attached to keep her quiet. The courtroom fell silent. Clarissa's face drained of color. And Dad? He looked at that note and finally broke. He asked to speak. The judge allowed it, and in a voice that sounded 20 years older than the man I remembered, he said, "I let them talk me into believing Rachel would be fine on her own, that she didn't need anything, that Bryce deserved more because he stayed. But the truth is, I was ashamed. I knew I'd failed her, and it was easier to rewrite the past than admit it." I didn't look at him. I couldn't, not yet, because even if he was finally telling the truth, it was too late. The judge ordered a full pause on the estate transfer, all assets frozen, and a full trial scheduled for the following month. That night, I stood outside the courthouse, reporters surrounding me. One asked, "What do you hope to gain from all this?" I didn't say money or property. I said my name, my mother's memory, and the truth. The next morning, my inbox was flooded. Stories from people across the country who had faced the same thing. One woman wrote, "My stepmother erased me too. I thought no one would ever believe me, but your voice gave me back mine." And I knew. This fight was never just about the house. It was about every daughter told to sit down, every woman erased by greed, every legacy rewritten by people who never earned it. But I wasn't finished yet, because for everything they took from me, I was about to take something back, and they wouldn't see it coming. The month leading up to the final trial was the slowest of my life and the loudest. The media buzz wouldn't die down. My inbox flooded daily. People called me brave, dramatic, ungrateful, inspiring, all in the same breath. But I wasn't trying to be a symbol. I was just trying to be heard. to be restored, to walk back into my own life, not as a guest, not as a footnote, but as someone who belonged. The morning of the trial, I wore my mother's brooch, the one she wore to her last anniversary with Dad. I stood tall despite my shaking hands. This was it, the final showdown. The courtroom was packed. Clarissa and Bryce came in dressed like they were heading to a gala, calm, smug, camera ready. Dad came alone. He looked older, tired, like a man finally crushed by the weight of his own silence. The judge opened with the findings. My mother's will was valid. My trust in the house had never been dissolved. The transfer of business assets was ruled improper due to undue influence and failure to disclose the trust. But then came the most unexpected twist. One final truth that even I hadn't seen coming. During discovery, my legal team had subpoenaed Clarissa's emails. In one exchange between her and her lawyer, sent just before the new will was finalized, she wrote, "If he doesn't sign this, I'll tell Rachel what he did after her mother's death." That should be enough to make him comply. The room froze. Even the judge leaned forward. "Care to explain, Ms. Hale?" Clarissa went pale. She tried to dodge, but the court ordered her to clarify. And what she admitted next was a dagger straight through everything I thought I knew. She said, "After his wife died, William, he got into some debt. He forged a few things, sold some items from the business under the table. I found out. I told him I'd keep it quiet, but only if he adjusted the estate to protect Bryce. She blackmailed him, used my mother's death as leverage, and my father. He let her, to protect himself, at the cost of everything. I couldn't breathe, not because of the betrayal, but because it explained everything. Why he stopped calling, why he let them edge me out, why he sat silent when they rewrote our life. He had been ashamed, and instead of facing me, he buried me." The judge didn't waste time. She ruled that the Bennett family home be returned to me immediately as per my mother's trust. Bryce's name be removed from the business ownership. A formal investigation begin into Clarissa's coercion and potential fraud, and that damages be awarded for emotional distress, inheritance obstruction, and financial misconduct. I didn't celebrate. I didn't cheer. I just cried, not from joy, but from release. Years of silence, gaslighting, displacement. Finally, someone said, "You were right." Clarissa stormed out before the verdict was finished. Bryce wouldn't meet my eyes, and my father? He stayed seated, then finally looked at me. For the first time in years, he whispered, "I'm sorry." I wanted to hate him, I really did, but the truth was, he had already lost everything, and me? I was walking away with more than a house. I was walking away with my mother's legacy restored, with my name cleared, with the power to write my story forward. I moved back into the house a month later, not forever, just long enough to reclaim it. I replaced Clarissa's decor with old photos of Mom. I opened the garage doors and smelled motor oil and childhood all over again. And then one day I painted the front porch, just like Dad promised we'd do together when I was 10. Only this time, I did it alone. Eventually I sold the house, used the money to start a small business, a consulting firm that helps women protect their legal rights in family estate disputes. Because what happened to me happens every day, and I wasn't going to let it happen in silence anymore. Sometimes I get letters from daughters, from stepdaughters, from women who thought they were crazy for questioning what was happening around them. They all end the same way. Thank you for not going quietly. And to that I always say them, they tried to write me out. But I wrote myself back in, because now my mother's legacy doesn't just live in brick and wood, it lives in every woman who refuses to be erased.